or the death penalty.
In New Jersey, voters approved the legalization of recreational marijuana. So what is the real legal impact? Tonight, we take a closer look. Plus, the 13th Juror Speaks. Tonight, we take a look at your reaction on social media. Great to have you with us, folks. I know it's been a very intense 24 hours, right? A lot has happened in our country. A lot of people very stressed out. So I just want to take a moment, talk about something else that was on the ballot in several states, including my home state, where I'm originally from. My name is Vinny. Of course, it's New Jersey, right? Marijuana was on the ballot, and he wasn't running for anything, no. Legalization. Not medicinal, not decriminalization, where, okay, I'll give you a summons, I'm not going to prosecute you. No. Not medicinal, where you're trying to help people who are suffering. No, recreational use of marijuana in the Garden State. Our affiliate, WPIX, has the story tonight.
New Jersey voters, putting it bluntly at the polls, overwhelmingly voting to legalize recreational marijuana. But before you can buy it, the state has to certify the ballot results, and the legislature needs to hammer out regulatory guidelines, which could take months. State Senator Nicholas Scutari plans to introduce a decriminalization bill as early as Thursday and was hoping local dispensaries would have been prepared for the new demand.
Wish they'd be ready next month because they knew this day was coming. So I'm a little disappointed that they don't have enough product right now, because if they had enough product, probably by the end of the month, if not next month, they'd be able to sell it to anybody over 21.
New Jersey's growers now need to ramp up in-house production. Recreational marijuana can't be shipped in since it's still illegal on the federal level.
Setting up a grow is a maybe not multi-year, but it's a year-plus project. And, many operators might be looking for a third or fourth site to try to keep up with the demand.
Dispensaries also want to make sure that their medical marijuana patients remain taken care of.
Making sure that all the patients continue to get unlimited access to to the medicine that they need.
So it passed. Now, it wasn't just New Jersey. Let's go to our election 2020 marijuana map and look at all these states that are turning green, folks. You've got New Jersey, Arizona turning green. You've got Montana, South Dakota, adding to other states that have already passed it. You're talking about Alaska, California, Colorado, one of the originals, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Nevada, Oregon, another one of the originals, Vermont, Washington State, and, of course, the District of Columbia as well. I mean, it's just rolling across the map. So let's bring in our think tank, figure out what the legal impact is of all of this. Joining us tonight from the green state of Michigan, trial attorney Jamie White is with us. Great to see you, Jamie. He looks very relaxed tonight. Why is that? Also,
well, I'm not in New Jersey, so I don't know. It just must be that. For one, I was up all night watching. I suspect what you were as well, so I haven't had a whole lot of sleep. But not the reason New Jersey.
Gotcha. In Austin, Texas, family law attorney Holly Davis back with us. Great to see you, Holly. And joining us in West Palm Beach, Florida, the state attorney for Palm Beach County, Dave Arenberg, is with us. So, Michigan, apparently one of those states that's already green, but Jamie is straight with us tonight. But Jamie, how has that worked out in Michigan? I mean, is it something that is like if I drove to Michigan, would it be very obvious to me that this is one of the states where marijuana is legal?
It would be obvious in some parts of the community, in some parts of the state. This has been a progression in Michigan. I think it was about 10 years ago, when I say we, there was a ballot proposal that allowed for medical marijuana in the state of Michigan, and that opened, a huge experimentation as far as how people were going to approach it from a production point of view, from a use point of view. That progressed for a significant period of time. There were attempts to remedy all sorts of, obvious regulatory problems in our legislature, and they were just unsuccessful, unwilling, or unable to address the issue. So what ultimately happened is a second ballot proposal was put on that passed overwhelmingly a couple years back, making marijuana recreational and legal, as you've described, not just decriminalized, but individuals can actually go out and produce marijuana and sell it to the public. I'd say the big problems are, there was a huge saturation of the market. There certainly were parts of my city in particular, the capital city of Lansing, where, these places were popping up every other door. That didn't last long. The market corrected itself to some degree, and municipalities stepped in and passed local regulations that were consistent with their individual value systems. So, I could tell you, I have not heard of any real problems associated with the grow and distribution recreationally of marijuana. The thing that we see that is going to be a problem is trying to define when somebody is under
under the influence. That's the big one. Holly, you're down in Austin, Texas, where I suspect there's a lot of marijuana floating around that city, but it's not necessarily legal yet down there.
Vinny, as we know from last night's results, Austin is a very blue city in the middle of a very large red state. So pot and marijuana is, a long ways away, I think, from coming to Texas. But I've been watching. I'm very interested in this development in New Jersey. I'm from Colorado, and Colorado has been the state that first legalized marijuana. And so I think all eyes have been on the data coming out of Colorado about whether or not the legalization of marijuana causes problems with crime and, fatalities on the road. And so far, I think that the reason why the legalization of marijuana has been so successful in recent years, again, this is not your father's America, right? The value system has changed. Even Republicans, a significant amount of Republicans are now reporting that they have no issue with the legalization of marijuana. And so I think all eyes have been on Colorado's data and even California's data. And so far we're seeing that the data does support the legalization of marijuana in states such as your home state of New Jersey.
Yeah. Dave Arenberg, you're down in Florida. You are the state attorney in Palm Beach County. Do you foresee, I mean, it may happen in Florida, I know they've tried, but what are the things that would concern you as being law enforcement that all of a sudden, okay, we're opening up shop down there?
Vinny, so far in Florida, we have medicinal marijuana. So if you get a doctor's card, you can partake. And so there are pot shops all around the place. And it's just one step before it's legalized for recreational use. As a state attorney, I am concerned first and mostly about young people getting access to it through edibles. I am also concerned about the effect on our roads. There is a recent study that shows that in communities that have had legalized recreational use of marijuana, there are increased auto accidents and other assorted crimes that occur on the roads and fatalities that occur on the roads. Now, look, I will enforce whatever law is on the books. So I'm pretty agnostic about it. I was just talking to my friend Michael Moore, who is the state's attorney in Beadle County, South Dakota, one of the reddest states in the country, and his state just turned green. So it is true. Holly is right that this is not your father's America anymore. But I may add a corollary to that. This is also not your father's marijuana. This marijuana today is much more potent than the marijuana of yesteryear, and that's what gives me a little bit of heartburn. Yeah.
Well, let's now, all right, we talked about the marijuana. Let's take it one step further and take a look at what they did in Oregon, okay? Right. Now, this isn't legalization. This is the decriminalization. So it's talking about heroin, cocaine, meth, ecstasy, LSD, mushrooms, methadone, oxycodone, I mean, everything. The whole laundry list. Small amounts equal fines. It's not criminalized anymore. And it's not like there's not a shop going to be on the corner that's selling the heroin. That's recreational use. This is just decriminalization. And I'll start with you, Dave, on this one. Would there be a concern that drug dealers would all of a sudden alter their game and say, okay, I'm going to sell drugs on the corner, but I'm just going to put enough in my pocket so it looks like it's personal use, and it'll be decriminalized. It'll be the cost of doing business. I'll get a summons, and then guess what? I'll go to the other corner and start selling.
Well, selling is always treated differently than possession. But yes, I mean, these drug dealers are always a little bit ahead of the curve. And so you've got to worry that they're going to find a loophole in the law. And as for decriminalization, Vinny, we've tried it here in Florida. During the pill mill stage of the opioid epidemic, about 10 years ago, the state of Florida deregulated oxycodone sales, allowed any ex-felon, anyone, to sell oxycodone in a pain clinic, and you can get a prescription and then dispense it right on the spot. And it created a massive effect of accelerating the opioid epidemic, 7 deaths a day in Florida. It was a debacle. So my concern on that list is not the decriminalization of marijuana, it's the decriminalization of oxycodone and all these other drugs that are far more dangerous. So no, I would be against that. I'd be concerned, as you mentioned, that the drug dealers will always use it as a way to get out of it. But ultimately, I think that when you're dealing, all prosecutors around the country will always treat that separately from possession.
You know, Holly, one of the hopes when they decriminalize and Oregon's trying to make money from, marijuana sales is to take the money and then use that for treatment. And, on paper, it looks good. I'm wondering what it's going to be like in Portland now. Do you think things will be better or worse now that they've decriminalized all of this?
I'm not in agreement with the decriminalization of the harder drugs. And I think that's because I think addiction is a significant problem that needs to be addressed. And perhaps Portland has come to the conclusion that the way that we're going to address our addiction issues is not to make it a criminal situation and create a lot of people in the system that shouldn't be there. But with all of that money that we're getting from pot sales, I'd really like to see them turn it into a place that can provide mental health services to people and addiction treatment as well. So I don't see that being a successful venture on the harder drugs. And I'm confused by that act when we juxtapose it with the big opioid settlements that are occurring across the country today. Billions and billions of dollars from opioid manufacturers because of this whole opioid problem. So if we're going to see Portland decriminalize the harder drugs, I'd like to see that in conjunction with an increase and an escalation of programs that address addiction issues and the major opioid crisis that Dave was mentioning.
Jamie, when I was a prosecutor years ago, when a criminal defendant was their first time through, 75% of them, 80% of them had drug issues. And their attorneys would always say, he or she just needs treatment. And usually the first or second time that they're in the system, they would get that treatment. Well, now in Oregon, someone's caught with heroin, cocaine, meth, MDMA, ecstasy, LSD, all these other things. They're not going to get arrested. They're not going to end up in a courtroom. Do you think it's a missed opportunity there?
To some degree, but I think the elephant in the living room, Vinny, is that this policy consideration is not about helping people. This is about saving money. Oregon, and they're going to have some challenges because they share state borders. But when we look at the other countries that have, employed this same policy, it really was to take away the nemesis of having to deal with these issues, having to deal with the financial burden, having to incarcerate people, having officers risk their lives for people that, quite frankly, in certain circumstances, don't want to help themselves. So I think there's been somewhat of an abandonment of the people that want to engage in these sorts of behaviors when it comes to creating these sorts of policies. With that said, I can relate to what you're talking about, Vinny. When I did criminal law, if I had a nickel for every time I stood in front of a judge and tried to convince him over marijuana, sometimes even back in the day, that this guy was worth saving and, we shouldn't lose his job and so on and so on. And let's give him a break and send him to probation. There certainly is value there. And I think as a society, we should never lose sight of our ability to help people. But going back to the economics, it's a heck of a lot cheaper to provide somebody with treatment as opposed to locking them up in a jail cell times 5x. So at the end of the day, I think this is our policy decisions, and I think we have to find the balancing act for where do we help people, versus how much are we hurting them. As a father of 4, I agree with the other panelists. I'm not a big fan of people not having any consequences for utilizing these drugs. At the same time, I represent 400 of the people that Holly's referring to in the opioid crisis, and many of them are dead. I represent their estates. So I've seen the harm up close and personal. And, at the end of the day, I have to be candid. Many of these folks they will concede that, they would not have stopped, but for the doctors stopping to write these items. They were not going to stop. There was no criminal law. There was no punishment. There was no judge. There was nothing that was going to get in the way. It was a futile exercise. So it's a balancing act.
Absolutely. All right, folks, programming.